Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good Tuesday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 18th of July. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can get the forecast very easily, no matter where you are, by calling 1-800-472-0391. You can also find us online at weather.gov/Alaska, or just trade out the Alaska part with Fairbanks, Juneau, or Anchorage, or APRFC, which is short for the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center. If you'd like to get some perhaps river information where you're going, you want to take a look at the Kenai, you want to take a look at the Saltra, wherever you'd like to go, the Chena, you certainly do that. If you have a question about anything you found, and maybe it's not working for you, or you just don't know where to look for this one particular thing you've been hunting for all day, david.snider@noaa.gov is a great way to get that information from me. I'd be happy to help you search and find whatever you need from your National Weather Service here in Alaska. Now, many of you have been looking around the new Alaska Aviation Weather Unit site. This is now the webpage you will find no matter what bookmarks you have. If you haven't changed them over the last several weeks that we're telling you about, they will default to this page. I used a little internet hands here because I want to point out a couple things for you. First of all, if you're looking for surface conditions, see, I can do that. Current conditions is the place you want to go. This whole row right here is a menu. You just click on it and things will drop out below that. Now, it's not exactly mobile friendly right now, and we know that, but once that mobile friendly site is rolled out, you'll have a similar experience to what you find on weather.gov/Anchorage, Fairbanks, or Juneau. The satellite picture, you'll be able to find more information there, different satellite views, and the surface chart and flight category. You'll also be able to find surface weather here, very close to the satellite picture and surface chart. And in flight categories, you'll get the forecast pages that you see with the surface charts going forward, along with IFR and MVFR conditions. And you'll also be able to see all of those pages in one form. So you can just click on down the row there and you'll be able to see where that goes. All these, again, are also drop-down menus here. Now, if you're looking for the AirMets, the TAFs, or the OBS, or PIREPs, you can turn all of these on or off on this page. Click this little box right here to allow yourself to zoom in and zoom out, move it around, and you'll also be able to use the area facts charts to get just one particular spot. So if you go to local info here, that'll drop a page down and you can see the area fact sheets. Select that, type in the region that you're looking for, and you can get a one-page printout and bookmark that and go back to it every single time to get the region of information that you really want and need. One other thing to point out here would be that you can bookmark some of these other current conditions under the surface map OBS. If you look at the map there, that should give you the color-coded regional plots of IFR, MVFR, VFR conditions for a certain sector across Alaska. So you don't have to start here on the map. You can always find the new site and the new links there and bookmark those and use them again and again. So hopefully this is working for you now after you've had a little bit of time to play with it. Weather.gov/AAWU. Fire danger is still present across the Yukon Valley. There's a few hotter spots, let's say, that are up there pushing maybe just over that extreme level there that we would draw the red shade in. But a considerable amount of the Yukon Valley sure is under that high fire danger. Now, south of the Alaska Range, just not the case. Conditions have been wet for weeks now, and one exception to that would be around the Copper River Basin, around Gulkana. We continue to see drier conditions there. In fact, a lot of this rain that's moving in is going to struggle to make its way into the Copper River Basin, probably drying up. Also on the north slope, you can see elevated fire danger there north of the Brooks Range to just about the coastal areas. The coastal areas are just a little bit wetter because of that sea breeze at times. So a little bit of a difference there on that boundary. Here is a look at the satellite picture, and once again we are talking about rainfall for south central. It's been a generally dry day for southeast. You can see the effects of high pressure there and the effects of low pressure out across the west coast. A very giant gyre moving out across the YK Delta and just north of Nunivak Island. This is the visible satellite picture, and it's showing clouds all the way across the North Slope. The broad southerly flow is driving up across the northern Gulf and into south central, bringing a wealth of rain here. We've got the cooler, wetter winds blowing into southwest, and because of the sunshine and the heat that the Earth has received already today, we're getting convection here across the central and eastern interior and into the Yukon. A lot of this is thunderstorm activity this afternoon. Here's the infrared picture. You can see a little bit more cloud cover up across the Chukchi Ocean and the Beaufort Seacoast. A lot of low clouds out here across the Beaufort and also across parts of the Bering. In fact, it looked like dense fog out around Shemya and Attu today, as well as some areas out across the Pribilovs. Just dealing with poor visibility, and fog was noted all the way across the Bering Strait and into Kotzebue Sound as high pressure was trying to set up across the region. By and large, though, it was well, a lot of stratus out there today. Nome looking at cloud cover through most of the day up across the north and west coast. Chukchi looking at some spots of rain out around Point Hope and Point Lay. And once again for southeast, a rare day this summer for you. The flaming ball of gas, of course, is your nearest star, and enjoy that while it lasts. There is plenty of cloud cover moving your way, but you might be able to sneak one more day out of slightly drier weather. Here's today's chart, and low pressure is sitting just south of AKwx at 1,008 millibars. It's part of a triple point here. Probably should have drawn a warm front in right about here. This warmer air is lifting northward and helping to wring out moderate to perhaps even heavy rainfall across parts of the eastern Kenai Peninsula and Prince William Sound. Light rainfall was falling across the Susitna and Matanuska valleys all the way out to the west around the Yukon and Kuskokwim Delta especially, and then there's our low pressure system around Nunivak Island. A very weak area of high pressure was seen just north of the central chain at 1,016 millibars, and I say it's weak because it's only 2 millibars off of low pressure just down the road at 1,014 millibars, and in between those two areas was that region of dense fog. And again, there's some fog north of the Bering Strait and Kotzebue Sound and north of St. Lawrence Island as well. And our friend high pressure here in the Gulf is everybody's friend in southeast today, 1,025 millibars, responsible for that sunshiny goodness hopefully you got to experience. High pressure up across the Beaufort at 1,017 millibars is trying to push some colder air southward, not being too successful with this broad southerly flow. And that's what's going to win as we get into tonight. Low pressure is working across Kodiak Island at 1,002 millibars. Even if I had drawn a warm front in there, it would have been absorbed into this occlusion front where the cold air and the warm air get mixed up and wrap in on each other. Areas of light rain will continue for most regions under this green canopy here all the way across Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula. One exception would be around Prince William Sound on the eastern Kenai Peninsula. We expect heavier amounts of rainfall in that region. Most areas around the southern road system will experience wet weather. North of Juneau to, let's say Yakutat, to Haines and Skagway, probably Gustavus, you're looking at a chance for some light rain, but most areas in southeast will have a generally dry night tonight. Showers and thunderstorms across the Alcan border and eastward into the Yukon. Most of the interior should clear up, but it looks like it's going to be a pretty mild night with southerly winds in areas of higher humidity moving northward your way. Boundary sitting just south of the Aleutians will trap in clouds and moisture there. Probably some stronger winds too. You'll see that shaping up here in the marine forecast in just a bit. Wednesday's forecast shows low pressure holding across the northern western Gulf. It might even back up just a little bit there, but the stronger temperature difference that we see out across the central Gulf will start to mix up a little bit more. And so we'll just call this a trough of low pressure now. And the same goes for what we find across the interior. Starting to crank up another opportunity for thunderstorms, though, all the way up into the Brooks Range, and even the coastal plain could see some rainy weather. Now look off across the Chukchi coast of eastern Siberia, Russia. 1,005 millibar low there is moving east and south. Now this is going to play a big role in where the ice goes as we go into the end of the week. If this tracks northward, a lot of the ice will probably move from west to east. But if this tracks a little bit further southward, the return flow across the northern edge of low pressure, remembering that air around low pressure rotates in a counterclockwise fashion. If that happens, that's going to move a little bit more ice west of Point Barrow. And there's plenty of ice to move. Straighten up my jacket here. I was reaching a little bit. And you can see that that's going to change things a little bit, just depending on that track. So pay attention to that forecast, and in the coming days, pay attention to how that low pressure system tracks over the course of the rest of the week. Now, the first wave of this will probably drop southward. That's a little bit of a cooler push, and with that, we get a better chance of rain across the coastal plain. Remember the fire danger? That should help if it really does rain that much. North of that, though, It is cold enough for rain and snow to mix. That's well north of the coastline, so nobody should be worried about any snow coming just yet. But it is cold enough. That's coming off the Arctic waters. As we look out across the eastern interior, no sign of that just yet. The cold front, though, moving southward, will be able to crank up showers and thunderstorms across the central and eastern interior. And south of that, our friends in southeast still looking generally dry, about as dry as it's been all summer, at least for a couple days. High pressure working its way up the eastern Gulf will continue to keep things generally stable there, but it's also feeding moisture into south central, and that's going to keep rain going for parts of the Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, and the Alaska Peninsula, all the way down to just about the eastern Aleutians. That old boundary sitting across the chain, that's falling apart. High pressure is taking its place, and it's helping to form another wave off of eastern Siberia, pushing a little bit of warmer weather toward the northern Bering. Behind that, it's very possible another wave of colder air will set up, and we'll have to watch how that moves as well. Here's a look at temperatures today. When you get dry weather in southeast, it bumps back into the lower to mid 60s. Looks like a pretty pleasant day for many, all the way from Sitka to Ketchikan, Heidelberg, and Hyder itself, 66 degrees there. The capital city at 3 o'clock was 57. Haines and Skagway, pretty close to 60 for a good part of the mid to late afternoon. Upper 50s around Prince William Sound, 61 in Anchorage, 59 in Homer, and 60 in Talkeetna this afternoon. Healy showed 65 in the afternoon. As you headed north toward Fairbanks, temperatures went way up to about 80 degrees. Lower 80s around the Tanana Valley, and eastward toward Eagle, 73, 76 in Northway, 79 around Fort Yukon, and that whole Yukon Flats region was probably some of the warmest temperatures we saw in the area today in the lower 80s. However, as you get south of Atkasuk into the Colville Valley there, 82 degrees just north of the summits, and then 64 as you get out toward the coast near Barrows. 45 was the coldest level we saw around 3 o'clock at Kaktovik. 50s and 60s around the Kotzebue Sound region. It was 57 in Unalakleet. Nome had 54. St. Lawrence Island near 50 degrees today. McGrath looking at 60 degrees with areas around Antioch to Russian Mission out toward Bethel in the mid to upper 50s. Cape Newenham was 48. Bristol Bay temps in the lower 50s. The Pribilof stuck in the upper 40s this afternoon. Adak and Atka were both 52. Same goes for Dutch Harbor and Alaska, actually, in 46, and fog in Shemya. Now, overnight lows are going to be pretty mild up north thanks to humidity and a southerly wind. 40s and 50s for south central, low 50s for southeast, near 50 for the Alaska Peninsula and the chain, southwest, coastal areas especially in the upper 40s. North and sound temperatures in the Seward Peninsula, upper 40s to about 50 degrees, and the northwest coast in the mid to upper 40s with highs there back in the lower 50s. A little bit cooler, but ahead of that front, look at temperatures back in the 60s and 70s. That is, or 50s and 60s, I should say, near 70 around Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse, and upper 70s and lower 80s for the central and eastern interior. South central with rain and clouds. Still in the upper 50s and lower 60s once again. Southeast, upper 50s to low 60s for you. And southwest, probably one of the cooler spots tomorrow around Bristol Bay, mid 50s. Even cooler still as you head out toward the eastern Aleutians, lower to mid 50s for you, and 49 in St. Paul. IFR conditions are going to be expected in the Pribilofs tomorrow. Hit and miss across the Gulf and the northern parts of the Panhandle. South central looking at hit and miss around the Cook Inlet region. A better chance of seeing worse conditions around the western Alaska range. Most of the interior should be okay. As we get into the afternoon, watch for convection across the central and northern interior. IFR conditions across Prince William Sound. Improving conditions for southeast, and IFR for St. Matthew down to the Pribilofs and out toward the Yukon Delta coastline. Here's a look at your pass conditions now. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass, we expect to see VFR conditions there. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass should see improvement throughout the day, maybe heading toward MVFR by the afternoon. Rainy Pass expected to be at MVFR through most of the day, with VFR expected in Windy Pass. Isabel Pass looks to be VFR through most of your Wednesday. Same goes for Mentasta Pass. We'll watch for thunderstorms there. Tanita Pass, we expect to see visual flight rule throughout your Wednesday. And Portage Pass will start at IFR, especially on the eastern side. Might see improvements to MVFR in the afternoon, and we expect similar results there in Chilkoot and White Pass for your Wednesday. Freezing levels show the cold core across southwestern Alaska with levels as low as even below 6,000 feet. Across extreme southwestern Alaska and Bristol Bay, levels are also a little bit on the cooler side right around the Chugach and Prince William Sound. But by and large, most areas in Alaska are looking at freezing levels above 8,000 feet and in some cases even more than 10,000 feet across southeastern Alaska, even warmer weather across the chain. Icing potential is really going to be focused across the northern Gulf and Prince William Sound and the Chugach. but it's also way up there, above 10,000 feet, so probably higher than most general aviators are going. Above 8,000 feet across southwest, you're looking at light to isolated moderate, but this area here could see some occasional moderate there, so higher flying aviators probably need to keep an eye on what's going on across the northern Gulf, and then eventually into the central and eastern interior as you head into Wednesday and Thursday. Tomorrow's jet stream shows the main northern river of air is really going right across the northern coast, 60 to 90 knots there from the west, and you can see several bumps working their way across the northern Pacific and Gulf, all leading into the main low there across the eastern Gulf with winds around 50 knots and another in Bristol Bay with winds on the south side up to 95 knots. That's steering your 9,000-foot winds and the low pressure in the western Gulf over Kodiak Island. Winds there really not too strong, 20 to 30 knots coming in across the Gulf, and then a northerly wind coming off the western coast, 15 to 25 knots. Winds over the Aleutians are running about 45 to 50 knots, and light winds across southeast only about 10 knots or so. Up north, 15 to 20 knots coming in from the west across the Arctic coast and the Seward Peninsula. Low pressure sitting in the same spot over Bristol Bay, 15 to 30 east to west across the southern third of Alaska. West and northwesterlies moving across the chain, 20 to 35 knots. And there's our light winds again across southeast. Looks like more of a north and westerly wind at about 10 knots for most of you. Turbulence is going to be limited to south central and the northern Gulf Coast below 6,000 feet. Watch for chop across the western Capes, Nunivak Island to the Alaska Peninsula and most of the chain there below 4,000 feet. Right now we don't see occasional moderate, but that could change, and if we saw those changes it would likely be here across the northern Gulf and around the Barren Islands. Watch for convection again across the central and northern interior. I'm back with a look at your ice edge and your marine charts here in just a few minutes. Stay tuned.
It's a complicated project, but a simple life. You can study whales all over the world, you can study harbor seals all over the world, but you cannot study them in silence all over the world. So we really need this sort of piece of wilderness, this untrammeled wilderness, as they say, in order to answer some of these questions.
So we've been monitoring underwater sound here in Glacier Bay since May of 2000. And the reason why we're doing that is to understand what the park is like from the perspective of a marine mammal, because marine mammals are very dependent on the natural sound environment.
If you sort of bring it back to humans, humans respond to noise in very stereotypical ways, and other mammals do the same thing. So, if you go to a concert with your buddy and if the music's really loud, you're going to talk at a higher pitch. You're going to talk louder, and you might have to repeat yourself. And marine mammals do the same thing if it gets noisy. So we're seeing, just which of those three that they actually do. We're here on Strawberry Island for the entire summer.
We sample 8 to 12 hours a day. There'll be 2 people who are on our beach station doing scans, marking each whale in the area, 2 people who are doing focal follows from our tower, which is a temporary tower that we have set up here on Strawberry Island, and then we have 2 people who are in the kayak who are doing fine scale acoustic sampling for harbor seals. Got a harbor seal at 23 meters.
Got it? What's our bearing?
Bearing is 5822121.
Being able to pair what an animal is saying with where the animal is saying it is an amazing data set. It's a hard data set to get. It takes a lot of work, but it can answer so many questions.
So our cruise ship right here in the background is right on time today. We have a blissful hour and a half before the cruise ship gets here where we can watch our whales in silence, and then our ship comes in, bringing with it the noise that it brings, and we watch our whales while the ship's here to see whether or not their behavior is changing. And then it's going to go up bay and bring passengers to go see the glaciers, and we are going to get that blissful quiet again to see whether or not our whales are going back to that natural behavior.
This is the computer that runs our underwater acoustic monitoring, and there's a 5-mile cable from my office that leads out to a hydrophone that's out recording live sounds in Glacier Bay. And if I turn this up a little bit louder for the moment, that's the sound of a male harbor seal roaring because it's the mating season.
Bartlett Cove, Strawberry Island. Building a good field team and building some good camaraderie is really important. We have sort of these daily routines of things that we do together. So there's a schedule that we check every morning, who's gonna cook lunch that day, who's gonna cook dinner. And then every day we take a group photo. And then every day we do a daily check-in. We talk about what worked that day, what didn't work that day, and what we learned either from the island or from each other over the course of the day. Surface 900600.
Last night, there were anywhere from 8 to 10 individuals right along the kelp bed off the point. And we were trying to figure out exactly what they were doing. So as acousticians, Michelle and I got a hydrophone.
That seemed like the right thing to do.
Put the hydrophone in the water to see what was going on. Well, we dropped the hydrophone and it was so quiet. There was not a single roar.
Nothing. We heard
It was
nothing.
just so unusual.
One of the things we did observe yesterday was 2 large bull killer whales who had come into the area that we learned today were transient killer whales. They do come into this area to hunt harbor seals. This is a pupping ground. That's what they come in for.
Yep.
We cannot in any way, shape, or form definitively link the presence of mammal-eating killer whales with the silence of harbor seals.
No, but it is quite interesting that they happened at the exact same time. It's always an adventure on Strawberry Island. You never know what the day's gonna bring.
This morning at 5:15 in the morning, the area was just boiling with whales. I had one 15-minute scan this morning where I was literally hopping back and forth on either side of the theodolite, calling out numbers to try and get all the whales as quickly as possible. And then 15 minutes later, we couldn't find them. Aside from getting to be outside all the time, my favorite part of doing my PhD is getting to work with Leanna.
It goes both ways.
It helps when you put 2 minds that think differently onto the same problem.
Global ocean noise is a real problem, and there are areas of the ocean that have underwater sound from vessels so often that you could almost consider it an urban environment. Glacier Bay is a very remote area, and it was set aside as a national park in part to do scientific research. And we're privileged to be able to use it as a natural laboratory where we can better understand the impacts of underwater noise.
There are some places that act like characters in your life, and I think that a lot of Alaskans can resonate with the fact that living here is like having another family member. It's like having somebody really, really important who's sort of nudging you to be a little uncomfortable all the time and to stretch yourself all the time because it's worth it. I've lived here for almost 10 years. I've made Alaska my home, and so I'm an Alaskan by choice.
Sea ice continues to change with warm and wet air moving up across the North Slope. The higher concentrations are still between Prudhoe Bay, Dead Horse, and out toward Point Barrow, with those concentrations above 80% in the white shaded areas. But a lot of what you're seeing is under 80%, and there could be some of those navigational waters that are indeed open. So make sure you're checking the charts, weather.gov/Anchorage/ice for the very latest information there. But remember, with low pressure sweeping across the North Slope, a lot of this will be moving depending on the track of those lows. Some of this ice could be moving from west to east, and some of that could slosh back the other way from east to west. Make sure you're checking the weather before you go out, as always. Here's a look at the weather in southeast. Light winds across the interior and the outer coast on Wednesday. Southerlies picking up in the Lynn Canal, 20 knots with 4-foot seas. Otherwise, 2 to 3-foot seas across the inside and 3 to 4, even 5-foot seas as you head up the outer coast on Wednesday. But winds pick up on Thursday. 10 to 20 knots continue inside with 2-foot seas down south, 4-foot seas for the Lynn Canal. But on the outer coast, winds come up to 20 knots in all areas with 7-foot seas expected with an east and southeasterly wind on Thursday. For South Central, stronger winds have arrived already. Northern Gulf Coast regions looking at 20 to 30 knots sustained, 6 to 9-foot seas across the Northern Gulf, 4-foot seas inside of Prince William Sound and winds up to 20 knots. And northeasterlies driving down Cook Inlet, 25 to 30 knots with 7 to 9-foot seas in the north, 3-foot seas inside of Shelikof Strait with a westerly wind at 15. That picks up to 25 knots on Thursday from the north and east. Northeasterly winds diminish in the northern parts of Cook Inlet And we'll keep our easterlies going across the northern and western Gulf. 20 to 25 there with 6 to 7 foot seas, 8 foot seas outside of Prince William Sound, and 3 foot seas inside of Prince William Sound there. 15 knots with a northeasterly flow on your Thursday. Inside Bristol Bay, northeasterlies 15 knots with 4 foot seas, stronger winds down the coast, and opposing flow with a west wind at 25 knots, bringing up 9 foot seas in those regions. Higher gusts should be expected across areas in the lee side of the Alaska Peninsula, 20 to 25 for winds there, and 5 to 8 foot seas as you get into Wednesday. Look for more of a northerly push as we get into Thursday. Northeasterlies inside of Bristol Bay with 5 foot seas, 7 foot seas down the coast. Northwesterlies around Sand Point and King Cove, 25 knots with 7 foot seas, and a northerly wind between Castle Cape and Chignik with a 6 foot sea there on Thursday. For the Aleutians, broad westerly winds will take over most of the region. They're 15 to 25 knots, all areas. Look for a northwesterly push, though, from Unalaska to Nikolsky on the Pacific side with 7 foot seas. There's 6 to 7 foot seas down the rest of the Pacific coast. Out west, you're looking at 7 to 9 foot seas, and on the Bering Sea coast, 4 to as high as 7 foot seas from Unalaska to Adak on Wednesday. For Thursday, winds diminish in just about all areas. West of Nikolsky, you're looking at 10 to 15 knots. More of a light and variable flow here, but the winds start to pick up a little bit more to the west. 15 knots with 5 to 6 foot seas there in the central and the west, and northerlies continue from Nikolsky to Unalaska on 20 knot winds with 5 to 6 foot seas there on your Thursday. Now, as we get into the west, look for northerlies coming down the west coast, 10 to 20 in those regions with 7 to 8 foot seas on Wednesday. As you get into Thursday, winds diminish 10 to 15 knots, more of a light and variable flow around St. Paul and St. George with 3 foot seas there. And up north, light winds around Prudhoe Bay, but a stronger easterly wind for Kaktovik, and 10 knot winds down the Chukchi coast with 2 to 3 foot seas. For Thursday, a stronger westerly wind, 20 to 25 with 4 to 6 foot seas, and light winds continue for the Beaufort Sea coast, but it does have an onshore flow. Recapping tonight's weather, watch for a broad area of rain to continue across south central and southwest, while southeast remains generally dry. A few thunderstorms across the eastern interior and light rain for the northwest coast. Low pressure will continue the chance for thunderstorms across the interior and the Brooks Range for tomorrow afternoon. Rain continues around Prince William Sound, northern sections of southeast and southwestern Alaska, and for Thursday, rain begins to diminish across south central and still holds off in southeast. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.